So I talk to my sister a lot, and she's almost 2, so
Nice.
reaching that point.
Well, greetings to everyone. You are tuning into Teacher Talks this week, and I'm so happy to have one of two guests that we're going to have today. We have another guest that's coming in just a bit, is finishing up some obligations at church, and will be joining us probably around 12:30. This is Sonia Gunderson. I have the incredible privilege of getting to work with her at Seattle Pacific University. I serve as the director of music education or orchestral activities for anyone that I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet. And I work with Sonia as one of our music teacher candidates. She's in her senior year at Seattle Pacific and is in the midst of her clinical internship. So she's out in the field right now working with a mentor teacher. In all of these teacher talks, we've talked about so much. Legitimately reached so many fantastic conversations, celebrating things that are going on, this time of transition that we're in and change that we're seeing, challenging some of the things that we've inherited and that people are holding on to in this time of transition, and also challenging a lot of the structures and the ideas that are being perpetuated in education and in music in general, regardless of this unique time that we're living through. In all these conversations, in 44 weeks, I suddenly recognized that we had not engaged with some of the students that we have right now. And for my colleagues in music education that are preparing future educators, I hope that this is a call to action, that if you are not already actively engaged in critical conversations with your future educators that you, again, have the privilege of working with, that you really talk to them, not just a matter of how are you doing and what are you thinking, but going beyond that, asking them how they're preparing for their future, what they imagine the future to be. There's so much uncertainty that we've wrestled with. How do they feel about the discipline right now, and what is it going to look like? Again, I've said the word multiple times, but I mean it. I'm so privileged to be able to work with these future educators, and most importantly, to be able to engage with some of them today, with all of you that are watching and listening, whether you're watching our live stream on YouTube or on Facebook, or if you're watching this in our archived playlist on YouTube. I hope that you join the conversation. So you can post on YouTube or Facebook and we'll see those comments. Please feel free to join the conversation. You might see 2 or 3 people on the screen, but I always encourage you to post your questions or comments as we're talking. And again, don't let this be the end. We want this to inspire conversations in your own learning communities. So take what we're talking about and then contextualize it for yourself and engage our future educators right now, whatever journey they're in, even if they're freshmen in your music ed program. What do they see the future as music education? What does that look like for them? What does it look like for us as music education professors? It's been one of my greatest challenges to try to imagine the future with my students, as I have no experience in the world that we're living in. I never had to teach fully online. I never had to teach through a global pandemic. I never had to teach through the scale of social and political unrest that we've seen. I mean, it's all speculative at this point. There's no textbooks written about it. There are a limited number of resources and articles. So we're all learning together. It's such a unique time. And you caught right at the beginning of this. So Sonia was sharing some information about her sister, battling, as it were, children during this unique age. And today is unique because my wife is at work, my partner, who does an extraordinary job of helping us sort of balance our work-life obligations. So she's working late today. So I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old that should be eating lunch. Graham, sit down. Eat your food. They should be eating lunch, and we'll see. Here, we'll break our third wall, and I can give you some perspective. Can you guys say hi? You gonna wave?
Hello.
There they are in all their glory. So thank you to everybody for your patience. I might have to mute or turn around and be distracted, but I always like to give a few minutes for people to join us. Thank you for those that are already listening. A little bit more context for some that might be joining for the first time. Teacher Talks is an opportunity to connect with musicians and educators all over the world and talk about music and education. This is a project that was started by the Falcon Feathers. This is a student organization at Seattle Pacific University. It stands for Future Educators in the Arts, Transforming Human Experience and Realities. I am so honored to be able to serve them as the Director of Music Education and Orchestral Activities, and to use this platform to engage people in conversation. So without any further ado, we're about 5 minutes past the hour. I want to be able to turn it over to Sonia. And Sonia, if you would, just give people that are listening and watching a little bit of context, particularly kind of where your interests lie, where you hope to be after you graduate, and what you've been studying, and kind of where you are right now.
Yeah, so I'm Sonia Gunderson, and I'm studying, going to be a music educator. I'm currently mentoring at middle school in Seattle Public Schools and doing choir, and it's been fun. You know, some people might say, "Oh, middle school, like that's challenging, or that's a whole other area of humans." But I really love middle schoolers. I think that, I mean, for me, I know I'm alone in this opinion mostly, but middle school was like my favorite years of like life. So I mean, I met some great friends there, and my dad has been a middle school science teacher for his whole life. So just like kind of growing up with that mentality or whatever. I mean, he's kind of a middle schooler himself. So, but yeah, my passions or my what were you saying? Yeah, just where I'd like to go with music, my focus.
Yeah, so
really,
choral and middle school, you're talking about that, but some of your other interests, I know that you're really interested in world music and
yeah,
traveling.
yeah. I was just about to say, like, I think, you know, one of the reasons I considered music education was because of previous head of ed, Dr. Ramona Holmes, really musicologist, kind of, and Dr. Newby as well. You know, showing me how my love for culture and language and the value in that could be combined with my love for music as well. And like, so I decided to do music education, and I'm really passionate about bringing world music into the classroom and making it more of a focus instead of just kind of like a side act. I want it to, you know, you can teach the basic, you know, music, harmony, rhythm aspects of music through anything really. So to bring in and normalize the value of world music in the classroom is my focus as of right now. It will develop, I know, as I continue and experience teaching. So I would love to teach eventually internationally, either long term or short term. So yeah, looking towards the future. I mean, I'm kind of a like roll with the punches kind of person, not a huge planner, but I know that in this next phase of applying for jobs, I'm really open to anything. So willing to experience whatever comes at me. So
That is awesome. So I entitled today's episode. I love trying to search for titles that can help us start our conversation. And this was a book that I got to introduce you to, I think, last year, and I have used it in our Foundations in Music Ed class. It's called The Journey from Music Student to Teacher. And for anyone that doesn't know, it's a great book. Michael Raber and David teach out. It's kind of a manual. It's really great. It says a professional approach, and it's basically a workbook. It's got all these interactive activities, but the title is something that really caught me. And there's another book that we use quite a bit that Sonia has heard me quote from a lot, and that's one by Birch Browning. He was actually the very first teacher talk that we did, and this is an orientation to musical pedagogy. And I reference this one because he talks about the same thing that I believe Raber and teacher reference in this journey that we have from student to teacher, and that's that that observational apprenticeship that we have, that we come into education, especially in higher ed, having spent 15, 16, 18 years in public school, and the only thing we really understand about teaching is what it is to be a student. Now, Sonia, you're really blessed that you have a teacher in your family, and it is not just a statistical coincidence that a lot of people that go into education usually have educators in their family because they sort of see that, aspire to it, or admire it. But it's it's such a crucial part of going into the field is that transition, that journey, if you will, that happens over years. It doesn't end when you get your diploma. You still sort of battle. One of the words that comes to mind is the imposter syndrome that everybody suffers,
Mm,
including myself, of sort of getting out into the field and then being confronted with this. Am I a teacher now? Like this big question of, is
mm,
this it? I have the degree, I have the certification. What do I do now? Like, even though this is a dramatic analogy, I remember when we had our first kid, when my daughter was born, Emily, and we spent like 3 days, in the hospital, and it was this magical time. We were in this wonderful little bubble, and it was just us with this newborn baby, and the nurses, and everybody was there to support us. And then on the third day, they were like, okay,
go home.
bye, go home. And I remember we got in the car and we like waved goodbye to the nurses. And my partner looked at me with this just shock and fear in her face. She was like, are they just going to give us this child and like we just go home and they just trust us to like
Yeah.
this human being? Like it's okay for us to do this? And I kind of laughed, and then like she didn't laugh. It's this awkward moment of like, no, no, it's gonna be okay. Like, yes, we take the baby now, and I can only I can only imagine, you know, what it is like for future educators right now. But I can also recall my first day in the classroom that I had
Mm,
that immediate fear of like, is this really it? Like they're just gonna lock me in this room with all these kids, and this is okay? Like that I do this now, like so it's weird because it does seem like we flip a switch in every
mm,
program, and no matter how well you prepare your students, we're student teachers all the way to graduation, and then all of a sudden you're the teacher. Um,
mhm.
and there's the cliches of, like we're lifelong learners and we're always a student and all this, but like pushing past that, we really do get indoctrinated to believe that we are learners and that we
Mm,
are subservient to teachers, which is a model that I
mm,
don't like. That we
mhm.
are in service to the educators we work with, and even through student teaching. And actually, we had talked about this a little bit last night, ironically, which was not
Yep.
intentional. How do you jump that huge gap between being the student
Exactly.
and being the teacher? And particularly, I think all of that is a normal thing to experience. Add on top of it a global pandemic, teaching
Mm,
online, social political unrest. It's huge. I mean, it's just massive. So I
yeah.
wanted to I wanted to sort of start there and just from a very broad perspective, but I invite you to, add any details that you want to. How do you feel about this journey so far? How does it feel to, have spent 4 years, in college, like you're studying, well, I mean, three plus, because you're in your senior year, like you're in it, you're learning, and then all of a sudden you're in the classroom and you're
Mhm.
in an internship and you're Miss Gunderson and, it's virtual and so what has that been like, this journey from being the student to being the teacher?
Yeah, it's been sorry, I need to like I have a lot of thoughts. So like if I'm like pause, like just give me time to like go on to the next thing. But yeah, this journey has been it's been different. I think, I was really ready for the classroom. Like last year, I was just like, I want to start applying this. Like I'm done with school. Like I like not that I don't of course I don't know it all, but I just like I feel like the next thing was like I just need to apply this to like make this more meaningful. And then the pandemic hits and I'm online and not in just one of those cases that surprisingly happened a lot in my life where like I expect something and it's like taken from me in like multiple forms of like people leave their jobs or retire or death or just all these things. And like in this case it's a pandemic and it's like crap, like I'm disappointed, but like how to rise to meet the new challenge of teaching online. And now in a way like I'm in the same level as my mentor in the way of like we're both adjusting to this online format. I mean, she still has like a ton to teach me, and leads by example with oh, like how to like form lessons appropriately for this age group and stuff like that. But yeah, the pandemic is definitely like it makes me think like oh, in a way, I hope that next year we're online so that if and when I'm in my job, like I'll be able to ease into like, okay, I'm a teacher here, like online in this screen to my students. But then in a way, I feel like I'm at a disadvantage in the fact of like when I get into the classroom in person again and we're no longer remote, hopefully that will happen. But like, I feel like I might be at a disadvantage and I'm going to have to give myself, grace in those when that happens. So yeah, those are some of the main things that have come up. Something that has been cool and I need to do some more like inner reflection on this is that like a lot of insecurities have also come up in the fact of like, kind of how Dr. Hansen and I were talking 2 nights ago of just like, I'm kind of one of those people, like, I'm willing to advocate for myself, but like, oh yeah, like in this case, like, I don't think I know best sometimes. And like, I have that mentality of like, oh, you say this is what works. So like, I'm going to just do that because that's easier. And so, like, challenging myself, especially in these next few months as I'm like wanting to create lesson plans and really take over this one class, is to really form thoughts and form a habit of thinking in the way of a teacher of this is my class and I am capable and I'm gonna make mistakes, but that is okay. I know that, I don't know if anybody else who's listening has had this experience, but sometimes, in the music classroom or just in the classroom in general, of mistakes being something that are maybe frowned upon, or you kind of want the perfect take or the best the best answer in the class, and kind of just especially as I've continued on my college journey, my journey of life, it's just like making mistakes is really important, and normalizing mistakes is important. And so I think, like, I don't know where I was going with that, but that's just, my mentality of like, oh, I'm going to make mistakes and that's how I'm going to learn, but I need to not be afraid of making those mistakes because I'm still terrified of that. So, yeah.
I love that you used the word grace earlier because it's such an important concept,
Mm,
especially in the time we're living through.
mm,
No, I've had to tell you and your colleagues that are in their internship right now, like no one knows what's going on, and that's a really weird place. It's a weird place for educators to say that. Like we
mm,
don't know what tomorrow is. I mean, to the extent I know we have teachers in Washington right now that literally don't know what tomorrow is. I mean, the
yeah.
district is constantly evolving and changing, and needs are being changed, and it's so it's like, well, what's tomorrow going to look like? I don't know. I'll probably get an
Mm,
email at 6 tonight that tells me whether or not we're meeting in person, and whether So there's so much unknown that it is it is almost counterintuitive, because even as I prepare future educators, I want to build a sense of agency and confidence that they can face uncertainty
mm,
and kind of push through it and say, like, no, like, I'm going to try this. And like, if I mess up, it's okay, but I'm going to do it with confidence. And for me to be in a place where I now have to practice that, usually I felt like, well, I've had that experience, I've lived through that, so I can tell you with certainty it's going to be okay. I
mm,
had that same concern or hesitation, and then I tried it and it worked out to my benefit. So take my example to reinforce, your gumption to sort of push through. Where like, it's going to be okay. I
mm,
can't say that. I can't say, well, when I taught through a pandemic, I made it, and like, I don't know, like, I have to just sit there and say, how would you deal with this? Like, what? Yeah, I'd curl up and cry. Like, I don't know how I would deal with suddenly having to teach online. That is a weird place to be, working with future educators, to say, I mean, so many times, and not just with the interns, even with people that are still in the undergraduate curriculum that are going through the course sequence, the music ed course sequence, they'll say like, but how would this work online? And I have to, I'm literally holding a book that was written 8 years ago, and I'm going, I don't know, because this is a lesson plan that was meant to be done in person, and it does lose its pedagogical value if you transition to be online. And I have
mm,
to think with the students and not for them. I think that's one of my greatest challenges, is not to
mhm, yeah.
say, here's how I would do it, because how I would do it is really tainted with a career teaching in a traditional format. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it. I can't see it the same way. And I think it really invigorated me to hear you use the phrase, I kind of hope that I'm online next year when I start, because that's what you're being prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really kind of shook me, because I was like, wow, I mean, you are part of a generation of educators that have no idea what it's like to teach in the classroom, and you're going into the profession. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's surreal to me, that you're a unique generation of educators that are being trained for the field in this new environment that the field is actively trying to get away from. I mean, people are advocating vehemently to go back to in-person instruction, and here
Mm-hmm.
you are a part of a generation that's going, but don't do that. Don't do that to me, because you're training me to be online and then you're going to take it away. I mean, it's amazing to hear you articulate it like that, because I think that you're absolutely correct. You should want that experience, because that's what you're being prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're very wise to say, if it does change and you got to be in person, you have to have grace with yourself and with others. I'm just going to be learning how to do
Mm-hmm.
it, because you can't blame yourself. We're preparing you for an online world. So,
Mm-hmm.
wow, that's huge.
Yeah, and I do like I stand by what I said, but I do like eventually, don't get me wrong, like I want to teach in person. Like I think
Yeah.
that that would like be great. I just like maybe the first year, let's just like have it be on the first year so that I
Let's
can
keep
get like
one thing the same.
a little bit of my like feet underneath me, and then I can take it in person. But yeah, like, and even what you were saying earlier about like or admitting, especially with this online setting, having to say like, I don't know what teaching online looks like. I think that that's really, in a way, a great mentality also to take as a teacher with your students as
Yeah.
well in this uncertain time. I mean, I think a great trait in a teacher is to not know it all, to
Yes.
question the kids, the students in like, what do you, in anything of like, oh, whether it's like what's happening right now in the pandemic or it's in a lesson, you want them to lead it. And that way it makes it more meaningful for them. Because if you're just, you know, sage on the stage per se of like just teaching all the things, they're just gonna maybe be like sitting there drooling. But if they're able to like apply it and make it real for themselves, um, I think like that's way more. I know for me, that's way more. I learn better from doing that than if it's just like I'm just being pounded with ideas. But which is I think I was so eager to get into the classroom. Is just like I need to like figure this out for myself and like see what works and make mistakes and just the whole process of growth.
Absolutely. I'm curious. I'm gonna forgive me, because I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I thought about. I think this would be a good thing to do. Um, there's a really great exercise in the very first chapter of this book, and I thought that this could be really powerful. And we have not done this, so that's why I said I'm kind of putting you on the spot. But I think that you like this. So this book talks about the importance of establishing your identity as an educator and what
Mm,
that means. And I would love to invite you at this moment to proclaim out loud, I am a teacher, to say it out loud. I want to hear you say it.
yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. I'm a
So
learner.
how
I'm a learner, but I'm a teacher.
how does that feel, to be able to make that statement and to know there's truth in it, that you are a teacher? How does it feel to be able to proclaim that and know that you're working with kids right now in the classroom?
It feels. I mean, I want to just say like, oh, it feels good. I'm trying to search for like another like more expressive word, but I think it's something that I'm still coming into personally. Like since our conversation, I've been like, even as I'm talking or like processing with my roommate of just like, oh, like, because I'm a verbal processor, I'm like, oh, I just had this conversation and it was really good. Like, and starting to refer to myself instead of just like, oh, like I'm student teaching. Like, it's like to start referring to it as my class and using vocabulary that is maybe more possessive in the fact of like, I am a teacher and I am teaching, I am planning, I am I am in charge of this class instead of falling back on the like, oh, like I'm still like following my mentors, but is to like I've coming into the fact of like I can say freely I'm a teacher, but for me to like really mentally and internalize it, I need to use vocabulary and verbs that are like that reflect that. And so I think I feel more like a teacher today than I did on Friday, which is awesome.
Mm.
Yeah, so I'm a teacher. And I think that a lot of, when you say like knowing who you are, like so that you can teach, I think a lot of that, maybe to get a little bit more personal, is like I'm a teacher, but I'm also just a lot more than that. And
Yeah.
who I am what I do doesn't like make me who I am. So like I'm not only a teacher, I'm all these other things that are rooted in I believe I'm a child of God, and like that has strength and meaning. And so, that gives me confidence to be able to face each day when I feel like crap and I feel insecure. And so, I think, reminding yourself, however you find identity and however you like know yourself, and then like that you are your own unique teacher as well. And the fact of you're like, I'm gonna teach like nobody else, like whoever's listening, like you're gonna teach or even just live life like nobody else because you are you, uniquely you, and nobody can be you. And so I think that's like also I've been having to remind myself of that, of like I have unique perspectives that my mentor doesn't, or that my mentor also has unique perspectives that I don't. And so I can learn from her, and to also like even on the basis of like, oh, she's older than I am and I'm younger, so I'm going to relate to the kids different. So like to make the class more in that aspect as well.
God, amen. Man, that's huge. No, there's so much wisdom in that, because you're so right. I think we suffer in general, even in society at large, we suffer the idea of the teacher, like with a capital T, that teachers are one thing. And teachers can't be one thing because students are not one thing. And I love the fact that you articulate it the way that you do, of like, I am a teacher plus I am all these other things. And that being a teacher, it's interesting, becoming a teacher is transformative. I don't think anybody could deny that. You do change the way you view the world and how you engage with the world, because there's an essence of, genuine curiosity and thinking about how human beings and learn. And I mean, becoming a teacher is absolutely transformative, but becoming a teacher should be additive instead of subtractive. And in other words, when we become a teacher, we are still who we are and who we are becoming, and we become a teacher, rather than you have to start getting rid of aspects of your life in order to be a teacher. And that couldn't even be more true for music educators, because so many music educators that I know sadly will give up being a musician in order to be a teacher, or think that they have to choose. But you're still a musician. You're still, if you decide to teach in public schools, where you have to create a sort of anonymity of your political beliefs and your religious beliefs and practices, that does exist. But it doesn't mean that you are no longer Christian or Jewish or Muslim or agnostic. It doesn't mean that you can't have political identity. You're still adding on to who you're becoming. You know that I'm obsessed with Maxine Greene, and I quote her all the time. And one of my favorite quotes from her is, I am forever on my way." Like, you're always becoming. And I love that you share that, especially with the perspective of being in your internship right now, that you are a teacher, but it shouldn't take away from who else you are. It should only be adding. It's so wise. What is it, bud?
Yeah.
Good job. Where do you put your plate? In the sink. There you go, bud.
Oh yeah.
See, I'm a teacher and I'm a dad.
Exactly. And even like, and I even want to say like something that I've struggled with being a music major, because it is such a heavy major. Like a lot of people, kind of don't realize it's like two majors. You're a musician and you're a teacher. And a lot of that is like I'm one of those people that like I came into college after taking a year off and like was like I was gonna go into linguistics, thinking about global development, maybe even nursing. I was just like all over the place. Um, so like having like struggling once I was in the music ed major of like all these my peers, amazing peers around me are like amazing at music or amazing at this and that. And I was kind of like, I've just grown up with music and I really love it, but I didn't feel like I excelled at music particularly. I still feel like I don't, you know? And so it's just like, I have all these other things I like to do. Like I like to go hiking and horseback riding and I love to draw and you know, I create music too, but like that's not my main focus. And so it was kind of like, do I have to be like all these my wonderful peers who are like giving their all at music? And I say no. Like I
Yeah.
it's good to, you know, of course, develop your musical talents, your ability to, especially as a teacher, to teach music, to understand music. But you know, to also invest in the other things you enjoy that aren't music. Just because you're a music teacher doesn't mean you just have to be in everything music.
I love that you bring that up because this is a conversation that I'm having with I referenced this a little earlier for people that don't have the context. So we have a course called the Foundations of Music Ed, which is the very first class you take in the music ed sequence. It's usually for freshmen or people entering the major. If they're transfer students, you take this as a prereq to all the music ed classes. And this is the topic that we've been wrestling with: is how do we define success in our music
Mm,
classroom, and how do we define success for ourselves? You know, if you are not the principal in your section, it doesn't make you a bad musician. If you can't master certain solo repertoire, it doesn't mean you're not a musician. And it's important for our students to know that and experience it.
mm,
We should not create a club out of our music education classrooms, you know, that like,
mm.
well, only the select few have the right to learn this. And another shout out, this is another guest that we've had. I don't know if I can reach the book. I don't know if I have it up here. I
That
do.
has to
Here
make
it is. You know, I love my books.
Mhm.
So remixing the music classroom by Randall Alsop. We read a little bit out of this last year, and he talks about that this this exclusivity that we've created in music, that like only the select few have the right to study. This is something I'm so proud that SPU has changed, is that we've gotten rid of a lot of these like strict audition requirements, you know, like play one fast piece,
Mm.
one slow piece from you know, contrasting genres and stuff. Like, why, when you stop and think about that, why are we telling you that you have to be good enough to study something that you're passionate about?
Yeah,
Shouldn't we just, you want to study music? Great, let's study music. Why are we saying no,
man.
you're not good enough to study music? Like, that doesn't make sense in any other area. You know, it blows my mind. And Dr. also challenges that, and so many people do. You know, what is talent? What is success? It's such an important thing for music educators to take into their classroom. I don't think that's a conversation that should be restricted to college. We all need to be thinking, how do we celebrate the people that make progress, that make music, period? Even if it's
Mhm.
bad music, how can we say, wow, we tried something and it didn't sound great, but
Exactly.
how did you feel? It's so true. I am happy to say that Isabel is with us now, so I'm going to bring her into the conversation.
Yes! Isabel! Welcome!
So this is Isabel Mills, another one of our senior music education majors at Seattle Pacific University. Isabel, we're so happy to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. I hope you had a good time at church, and I'd love for people that are listening to know a little bit more about you. So Sonia did the same thing. We know you're a senior music ed major, but where are you student teaching right now? What is your area of emphasis? You know, choral, general music, instrumental. Kind of let them know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, and great talking, Sonia. Um, um, yeah, I'm Isabel. I am student teaching right now at Roosevelt High School in Seattle, and also St. Anne's School, which is a Catholic K through 8, also in Seattle. So I have kind of a dual internship thing with two part-time teachers. So that's been a really cool opportunity to have all the grade
Mm,
levels, because I came into music education at SPU thinking I want to do high school choir and that's it. And so it's been a really cool way over just coursework and internships to be like, oh, actually, I don't really know now because I like a lot more than I thought that I liked. So that's been really cool. And yeah, is that the only question?
So, well, and I put Sonia on the spot a little earlier, and so I'm gonna dive right in with you to have you do this. So we have been talking about this journey from student to teacher, and this giant sort of perceived chasm that exists between how we perceive ourselves as students and then how we perceive ourselves as teachers, and how we make that leap in the internship. We ask you guys to do it so quickly, and the struggles that come with that, coming into your identity as an educator. I referenced some of the books we've been using in the program, and there's a great exercise in one book that has you actually proclaim it out loud to say, "I am a teacher." And so I invited Sonia to do this, and I'd love for you to, in this moment, just say it. I am a teacher.
I am a teacher.
So how does it feel to say that, to know that you are a teacher, you're in the classroom? What does that mean to be able to say that at this point?
Hmm. It in some ways it feels like after all the coursework and all the work that goes into becoming a teacher, it feels like I deserve it, but it also feels like still kind of like an imposter syndrome kind of thing because it's like,
Mhm.
but I don't know. Am I don't know what it's like to have my own classroom. So I'm like, I'm a student teacher. And it's funny because my mentor teacher at Roosevelt, she like I would like call myself a student teacher and she like titled me a teacher intern and I'm like, okay. Yeah, yeah, teacher intern. Yeah, teacher intern. So putting the teacher before the student, it's a different thing now. It's like kind of that switch going on.
And I love it. As both of you know, and a lot of people listening know, I'm coming from Texas, and in Texas, it's always student teachers. They're always student teachers, and I sort of grew up in an environment where that was a norm. And coming to SPU, the Pacific Northwest in general, but SPU specifically, every university in Washington sort of does the student teacher process, the internship differently. And I've really come to appreciate the way that SPU does it because even though they adopt what's called a clinical supervision model, which I have my own qualms with, of course, right? I have to have an opinion about it, but like I have my own qualms with clinical supervision. However, I love the fact that they bring in the jargon to reinforce the idea of your professional identity. Instead of being a student teacher, as you just so eloquently put, the student is first. You're not a student anymore, even though, and Sonia, you and I mentioned this a little earlier, there's the sort of cliche of being a lifelong learner, which is true. We should always be learning. We're never done. But the idea that we put you in a position to be in a classroom and we would label you the student teacher to kind of force upon you that you should be in this student mode, as if that's pejorative, as if that doesn't give you the rights to teach in the classroom with your mentor, who is your colleague, right? You're both teachers. It's so interesting, and I love that SPU uses those terms to say, no, you're in an internship, right? Sonia, I used this analogy with you 2 days ago. It's the same thing as residencies for medical doctors. Like you graduate med school, you've taken the classes, you're doing the thing, and now you need to get out into the field and apply that knowledge. But for all intents and purposes, you're a doctor, you have the degree. You're trying to complete your license. And it's the same thing with educators. I am actively working on finding ways to celebrate that more so that people that go into their internship can say with confidence, I am a teacher. I have taken the content based coursework. All right. I've completed this undergraduate curriculum. I have passed the state licensing exams. I've done everything but sort of log these hours where I'm going to be applying things in the field. But I mean, you're working with human beings, right? Like these aren't test dummies. These are real students in front of you. You are teaching. Whether it's effective or not, whether there are new strategies you should apply, that's the point of the internship. But I always get frustrated, and this is not just in Washington, not just in SPU, but everywhere. When I've had the opportunity to engage with student teachers, and I can sense that apprehension. sort of this systemic failure of the institutions to prepare them to be educators and to force them to only see themselves as students as if that's a bad thing. We should always be students, but we have to accept that responsibility of I am a teacher now and have pride in that moment, that transition into the program. I wanna circle back to something Sonia and I had talked about before you arrived. So for you personally, what has it been like to be in this internship process right now amidst the pandemic, amidst the social political unrest? How are you feeling about the future prospects of going into the classroom?
Me?
Yeah, Isabel.
Okay. Yeah, it's different than what I was expecting, but um I feel like I'm able to roll with the punches. Um it's definitely a lot, and it's really cool being in Seattle, like interning in Seattle essentially, well, remotely. Still seeing that, kind of Seattle is like the people are still in the school, like it's reflected in the school, and outlooks are reflected in how schools are approaching things like racial reconciliation and those kind of things, and politics. And it's interesting between a private school and a private Catholic school and a public high school. There's different grade
Yeah.
levels going on. There's different dynamics. There's different things that schools are able to do, and one has more freedom or one maybe doesn't, or and so that's really interesting. It's really helpful to see like where I might want to place myself or just like get more acclimated. It's been a really cool preview. Um, for stepping into the classroom, it's made me really just nail in the point that as a teacher, I feel like you you have to be with it and like know what's going on in the world. You can't just be neutral. That's neutrality is harmful, and that's a different thing. But and even just like whatever your perspectives are, it's like it's student centered. Like learning is student centered. Social emotional learning is student centered. All this stuff is student centered. So that's something that I'm kind of learning as I watch teachers approach this. And yeah.
I'm curious, you bring up such a good point, particularly because of this unique sort of learning environment that we've put ourselves in. It's mostly virtual. You have had this really cool opportunity to be at this private K through 8 school and then this public high school, and you're seeing K through 12 from all the, I mean, it's a really rich internship experience that would not have happened sort of traditionally if you were. And Sonia, I want to bounce back to you. This is something that I am openly accepting scrutiny over because it is controversial and everybody does a little different. Both of you know I have been pushing for your internship to remain in one place. And I think sort of the standard in music education is that you spend some time in an elementary school and then some time in a middle school or a high school. So you do a little bit of primary, a little bit of secondary. Um, and it was the same in Texas. And I've always questioned that because in all the other disciplines, they are grade specific. And if you're aspiring to be a seventh grade math teacher, like you're going to be working with one class for an entire year. And although having the K through 12 experience in your internship is clearly valuable, I would never deny that. It almost seems a disservice for people that have the passion to say, I know that I want to teach high school choir, I know that I want to teach middle school band, that they only get a certain amount of time in that grade level with their internship. And there are obviously opportunities where you can put it into coursework so that you get some classroom observation experience. During the pandemic, that's not happening. So it's been this weird transition for me as a director of music ed to say, no, I think about the deficiencies that I had studying music education, and I don't want that for my own students. But some people feel conflicted of, well, no, I do want to experience both. And to clarify for people that are listening, you can still do both. You can do some time in elementary school, some time in middle school or high school. But I have started advising people to say, no, if you're really set on this is where I want to teach and you don't have interest elsewhere, Shout out to Megan. I always think of Megan because taking choral music methods and saying like, I have absolutely no desire to be singing in front of kids. I'm very passionate about instrumental music education. And I remember talking with her and her having so much anxiety about her upcoming internship and like reinforcing like, you don't have to go into an elementary school classroom if you don't want to. And seeing her like sigh relief, like, really? I'm like, yes, you don't. Why would I force you to do it? Like, that doesn't make sense. If you are interested in it, you should do it. But if the job was posted and your reaction is, there's no way in hell I'm applying for that, why would I make you go into that classroom? So I'm curious from both of you, but I want to bounce back to Sonia and hear from you. What is your perspective on spending an entire year with one class, with one teacher, or getting a little bit of both?
Yeah. Sorry, I miss people, and just hearing you mention Megan's name makes me so happy. Remembering that memory, I just want to say I miss whoever's watching this. If I haven't met you, I still miss you because I would have been knowing you this year. But yeah, I think I have like multiple thoughts on this, but I think it's valuable to keep the option open to be able to do both, because I think there's immense value in that. But also, if you know that you're set on one thing, then to do that, to have the option to just stay in that grade level the whole year for your internship. Something that like you mentioned to me, Dr. Hansen, because I'm open to like whatever. Like, I'll do high school, I'll do elementary. Even like I was working at the Boys and Girls Club, and even though that wasn't with music, like it was elementary school students, and it was definitely a different change of pace. And I feel like I got some experience and some realization to what it would be like to interact and teach elementary school students. And like I'm what was it? Oh darn! Sometimes my thoughts just cut out. But I know, or you said, Dr. Hansen, you opened up this idea to me, was that like, oh, like I could just major and get my certificate in secondary, but then like if I ended up maybe applying for an elementary school position, that school might not care that I don't have these test scores in this
The endorsement, yeah.
But if I show that I can do it and I'm a good candidate for the job, then I'll get it, and I have the job and learn there. But also, I think either way it would be a learning experience, whether I had previous knowledge with elementary school or not. But I think that it's also important to realize that whatever you major in, like it doesn't stick you in that path for life in general. Like,
yes,
with music, I might not even teach music. Like, I hope I do, but like same way with like, oh, I'm doing middle school, but maybe the only thing that's available is elementary when I graduate. So like, I'm going to go for that. So.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal, the requirements and the laws and the way everything is set up. It's, again, I have my opinions. There are certain things that I advocate for. I don't think that we should have as loose as the requirements are right now. I think that they do a disservice. In other words, in the state of Washington right now, you just have to be a certified teacher to be in the music classroom. You do not have to be endorsed in music. You just have to be a certified educator, which means you have a bachelor's degree, you've passed the state exams, and you've completed an internship. I think that does it as a disservice. There is specific content knowledge and pedagogical knowledge that is unique to the music classroom. So although I get the struggle and I understand logically, especially on the eastern side of the state where it's more rural, that they just want to get someone teaching the class, they want to offer the class. And so if they have a science teacher that can teach choir a little bit, it's not to denigrate those music educators, because they are music educators that are doing great work and don't have an endorsement. I don't think that the endorsement and this is slightly controversial to say, but just because you have an endorsement doesn't mean you're going to be a good music educator. So I think the converse is true. Just because someone isn't endorsed doesn't mean that they couldn't be a great music educator. That being said, trying to fit anything into one box of education is, I think, foolish. Trying to say that you'll get this endorsement and have this internship experience and it will equal a good teacher. It's just not true. We can never guarantee things like that in education. So
Mhm.
the more opportunities that we give each other, just in the field in general, to say, here's a path that you're going to pursue, and it has certain expectations and outcomes, and you're going to get those outcomes. But then, just like in the teaching cycle, you're going to reflect, and then you're going to modify, and then you're going to teach, and then it's a cycle. There's no end. When they hand you that diploma, when they hand you the certificate, it's the end of a process, but it's definitely not the end of the journey. um,
Mhm.
I'd love to bounce back to right. I'd love to bounce back to Isabel. You've already referenced this, but I'm curious if you have any other thoughts about you experiencing K through 12 right now, and for that matter, private versus public. Other thoughts you might be having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to um, dovetail what we were just talking about, my mentor teacher at the Catholic school, she never got a certification, and she's in her 20th year, and she's
Mm,
wonderful, just like amazing program that she built from the bottom up. And so there's definitely some wisdom to that and truth to that, that you don't just get your certification and then you're a good teacher, or that you
yeah.
stay a good teacher. Uh, but yeah, being in a private school versus a public school, I've never been in a private school. Like, I didn't grow up in private school, so but I grew up around this particular private school because I know the my mentor teacher really well. Um, and it's just a lot of behind the scenes politics, like school politics, that you're seeing that I'm seeing that are very different between the
Mm,
schools, and um, just with like money having to do with the private school. And like in the pandemic, you probably heard like a lot of private schools are letting kids back in to the building because they have different freedoms. Some of them do,
yeah.
because they're, yeah, not always affiliated with the government. But so that's been different, especially with parents paying for the education. Some of them really want that in-person experience for their kids. So that's been really difficult for the administration to deal with, I think. So, but yeah.
Well, and SPU's in that same position. I mean, we're, a private liberal arts school, and I have a lot of colleagues that are at state institutions that have not gone back to in-person instruction. And I mean, we can't paint with such a broad brush. There are exceptions all over the place. Um, but I feel fortunate because SPU is smaller, and it doesn't have the same dependency on tax dollars. It's not that we are immune to policies and regulations in the state, but we have a very closed system that we operate within. And so we can
Right.
make local decisions that are not necessarily affected by state policy, not necessarily. And I've been so impressed with how we've gone back to hybrid instruction, what we've been able to do. Um, one of our freshman music ed majors has a twin brother that is going to a state school in California, and he's been sort of bemoaning his experience because she's at SPU, living on campus, going to classes in person, having to wear all the appropriate PPE and follow social distancing practices. But she had that opportunity being at a private liberal arts school, and the state school that he chose, they have not been in person at all. And so he's been really frustrated. And she's been sharing some of those experiences. And you're right, private schools have a little more autonomy because they don't depend on the same tax dollars. Their budgeting systems are a little different. And it's weird trying to navigate that space, especially coming from former Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, who was very adamant to talk about school choice and promote that and promote charter schools and private schools. I think that it can look very attractive, especially in time of unrest like that we're in right now, not just socio-political, but
Mhm.
also the sort of health crisis that we're in and the pandemic. We can see into, the grass is always greener. We can see into the private school window and go, oh, but all those kids are going to school and all this, but it's never that simple.
Mhm.
And we should be complicating it as educators. We should be complicating the dialogue to say, like, now wait a minute, there is a cost to that, and it is prohibitive, and we have to mitigate all the variables rather than just pointing at one thing that happens in public or private schools and then unilaterally making decisions of, well, one is better than the other. There's a very, I mean, a very long, there's been a very long conversation about that. It is yet to be over, and it has been really brought to the fore since the tenure of Secretary DeVos, which I think is interesting. A lot of people have questioned that and questioned public school systems and why they exist and how they can be prohibitive. And so I have been very happy that you've had this experience to be able to see both sides of it as a teacher, not just as a student and not just as, you know, a parent looking from the outside in. I'm really glad that you've had this experience. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I think you were going to say something else.
No, I think I was done. But I'm really grateful for the experience too.
It's crazy. My goodness, I can't believe how fast the time goes. So let me ask this. I know this is such a huge thing to ask, and this might push us a little bit past the hour, but Sonia, I'd love to go back to you for your colleagues, people that are in their internship right now, you know, all over the country, and even for that matter, all over the world, people that are preparing to be full-time music educators. And then for people that are in the program that are either considering majoring in music ed or are in the midst of a music ed program, is there any advice? You've already given a ton of great advice, in my opinion. You've already said a lot of great things, but from a personal perspective, what are some things that you would depart to them to say, hey, keep this in mind or be thinking about this based off of your experiences?
I'm really bad at these.
That's a huge question.
I'd say, I mean, to people who are like in the same shoes as I am, me, Isabel and I like, of course I like draw a blank. I'm just like deer in headlights. It's okay if you're deer in headlights about this experience.
Right.
I like to say, like, remember to give yourself space and grace, and this is a growing process. Take each day one day at a time. Even though you have to, which seems like counter intuitive, but like think about each day or by week, and don't think about the big picture yet. Maybe like just focus on each day, and congratulate yourself once you get through each day, regardless of how it went.
Right.
And then and then to people who are, you know, thinking about becoming music educators or just thinking about, you know, what to do, just you don't have to be a great musician to be a music educator. Like, yeah, we all have securities. I mean, I can vouch for myself, but I'm guessing we all have securities in wherever we're at. And so like consider those insecurities, but don't let them, you know, minimize you to challenge them within whatever field you decide to choose. I don't know if that made sense, but I think I'm done.
It totally did. Totally did. Seriously, I think that is incredibly value. Especially, I have to echo your sentiment that there are these prerequisites and these standards that will prohibit you from being a great music educator, and it's just not true. And Isabel just made this point, you know, with one of her mentors. Like, it's just not true. Yeah, but I still can't play my 3-octave scale in sixth in tune. Like, guess what? That's not going to stop you from being a great music educator. It's just not. It might prohibit some doors from opening for you as a performer or as a musician, but it shouldn't stop you from being a great music educator. And if you're knocking on a door that will not open for you because you can't play, you know, your 3-octave scale in sixth, like, that's probably the wrong door to knock on, because that is not a prerequisite of engaging other human beings in music, right? That's just one way. So I totally, absolutely agree with you, Sonia. It's excellent advice. Isabel, sort of same thing. Anything that you would want to share with your peers or people that are aspiring in the field?
Yeah, just if you're on the fence about it, or if it's just really tough to get through it, just have your why like out as a carrot in front of you. Just remember your why, and like if your why is students, which it is for me, then that's your why. If your why is music because you love music, that's your why. And whatever it is, it's all going to come together once you're like in the field. So, but whatever you can do to just remember why you're passionate about this, because sometimes if it can be just like a lot of work and it can just start to feel like you're resenting it. It's like, oh, it's just a lot of work. I don't want to do it. But and it's like too scary or whatever it is. Just having the why and the passion really just helps keep it alive, keeps you alive in your work.
Amen. Man, such wisdom. You guys are amazing. I absolutely love it. And it's so true. To use one of my favorite Sonia isms, I'll say 100%. It's one of my favorite things that Sonia says in the classroom. 100%. 100%. It's so true. I can't believe it's already been an hour. I want to thank both of you. You have very busy weeks in your internship, and I appreciate you giving me some time on the weekend and sharing some of your experience and thoughts. I will see you all again as I have the privilege of being your supervisor. But I'm so grateful for the things that you guys are working through and how you're working with your students and your mentors right now. This is an unprecedented time. And to say that I'm proud of you as future music educators is an understatement, because you are a part of a unique generation of educators that is going through something that will absolutely shape you and your students' experience in the classroom. So just again, thank you for all the stuff that you're doing in your internship, for being teachers, because you're both teachers and doing all of this incredible work. And again, giving some of us this time today. For everybody that was watching, if you're watching live, thank you for joining us. And if you're watching on our archived playlist on YouTube, please don't let this be the end of the conversation. Talk to your peers and colleagues about what it means to be preparing for the classroom in this incredible time we're living through, and have that conversation in your community in context. Challenge some of the things that you're inheriting, challenge some of the things that you have adopted for yourself and for your students, and continue to grow. As was mentioned earlier, a quote from Maxine Green, we are forever on the way. We should always be in the process of growth and see new possibilities in front of us, especially when working with our students. Thank you again to Sonia and Isabel. I hope you guys have a fantastic week. If you'll stay on, I'll give you a little personal goodbye before you log off. And for everybody else, I'll end the live feed. Thank you for joining us for another Teacher Talk. I hope to be able to see you next week for another conversation.